It was supposed to be just another late-night ride, a simple pickup at the edge of the city, nothing unusual. But that night, behind the wheel of my old sedan, I found myself in the middle of something far darker and far more dangerous than I ever expected. A young woman running from a past that wanted to destroy her, a man desperate enough to chase her into the night, and me, an exhausted Uber driver, suddenly forced to make a choice that could change not only her life, but mine as well. This is the story of the most dangerous Uber ride I've ever taken, and why, even after everything that happened, I'd do it all over again.
Where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing.
The city never really slept, not completely. Even at 3 in the morning, there were always sounds. The hum of distant traffic, the occasional wail of a siren, the hiss of tires on rain-slicked asphalt. Michael knew those sounds better than anyone. They were his companions on nights like this, when the world blurred by outside his windshield, and the only thing keeping him company was the soft purr of his car's engine. He sat behind the wheel of a faded black sedan, parked beneath a flickering street lamp. The rain had started an hour ago, just a light drizzle at first. Now it fell steadily, turning the city into a mosaic of neon reflections. Reds, blues, and yellows rippled across the wet pavement like a painting that refused to stay still. Michael rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand and let out a slow, heavy breath. He'd been driving for 9 hours straight. 9 hours of strangers, of small talk and awkward silences, of forced smiles and quick exchanges of cash and thank yous. It wasn't glamorous work. It barely paid the bills. But for Michael, it was more than just a job. It was a way to keep moving, to keep from thinking too much about everything he'd lost. There had been a time when his life was different, happier, lighter. Back then, he didn't measure time in miles and fares. Back then, he measured it in laughter, his daughter's bright giggle echoing through their tiny apartment, the soft hum of his wife singing while she cooked dinner. Their home was small, but it was filled with warmth, the kind of warmth you didn't realize you'd taken for granted until it was gone. Michael could still see it clearly when he closed his eyes. The way his little girl would run to greet him at the door, tiny arms outstretched, her face lighting up like sunrise. The way his wife would glance up from the stove, tired but smiling, as he wrapped his arms around her waist and whispered, "I'm home." For a while, life had felt perfect in its simplicity. He worked a steady job at a small auto shop. Money was tight, but they managed. Love seemed to make up for everything they didn't have. But life has a way of eroding even the strongest foundations. First came the bills, then the arguments, then the late nights at the shop, followed by even later nights driving for extra cash. Michael told himself it was temporary, just until they caught up. But as the weeks turned into months, the space between him and his wife grew wider, and in that space, resentment began to root. The last fight was different, colder, sharper. It wasn't about money this time, or his long hours, or even the drinking he'd started hiding from her. It was about something deeper, something fragile that had finally shattered. He couldn't even remember the exact words now, just the look in her eyes, the way her face had gone pale, her hands trembling as she clutched her daughter's backpack, the sound of the door slamming shut, and the silence that followed. That silence had been the loudest thing Michael had ever heard. Since that night, the apartment felt like a tomb, too quiet, too empty. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old pipes seemed amplified in the absence of laughter and voices. Michael couldn't stand it, so he drove. At first he told himself it was for the money, but deep down he knew the truth. The motion was what kept him sane. As long as he was behind the wheel, he didn't have to sit still, didn't have to face the echo of his own regrets. The car became his world. The dashboard glow, his stars, the hum of the engine, his lullaby. Most nights blurred together. Faces came and went, a blur of passengers, each one a brief interruption in the monotony of his thoughts. Some were chatty, eager to fill the silence with their stories. Others rode in tense, uncomfortable quiet. Michael preferred the quiet ones. It was easier that way. A nod, a polite "have a good night," and then they were gone, leaving nothing behind but the faint smell of perfume or sweat. Tonight had been quiet, almost too quiet. It was nearing 1 a.m. and Michael was ready to call it a night. His eyes ached, his stomach growled. He just wanted to go home. whatever that word meant anymore. He pulled over beneath a street lamp to check his phone. The screen glowed in the darkness, showing his meager earnings for the night, barely enough to cover gas. Michael sighed, thumb hovering over the button to log out for the night. That's when the notification came. A soft ding, innocuous and ordinary. But for some reason, it made his heart skip. The pickup location was on the edge of the city, an area he rarely went to, isolated and half forgotten. The passenger's name read simply, Sarah M. Michael hesitated. He could decline it, go home, sleep, but something, maybe curiosity or desperation for just a few more dollars, made his thumb press accept. The app chirped, cheerful and oblivious, and just like that, Michael's ordinary night was about to become extraordinary. Location 1, Riverside Heights Apartments. The address led him to Riverside Heights, a complex of weathered brick buildings that had seen better decades. The parking lot was cracked and potholed, with cars that looked like they were held together by hope and duct tape. Michael had been here before. It was the kind of place where people lived when they were between better situations, or when better situations had stopped coming altogether. Building C sat at the far end of the complex, its entrance lit by a single buzzing fluorescent light that cast everything in harsh, unflattering angles. Michael pulled up to the curb and checked his phone. Unit 23. He was 5 minutes early, which was unusual for him these days. Punctuality had been another casualty of his recent life. He sat in the car, engine running, waiting. The rain had lightened to a fine mist, but the windshield wipers still squeaked rhythmically across the glass. Through his side window, he could see a few lights still on in the building, shift workers heading home, insomniacs, or people like him who had forgotten how to sleep properly. At exactly 1:15 a.m., a figure emerged from the building's entrance. She was young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and wearing a hospital uniform under a thin jacket. Even from a distance, Michael could see she was carrying more than just a purse. She had a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and what looked like a cardboard box clutched against her chest. Sarah approached the car with quick, nervous steps, constantly looking back at the building as if expecting someone to follow her. When she reached the passenger door, she knocked on the window instead of just getting in. Michael rolled down the window. "Sarah?" "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and he could see she'd been crying recently. "Can you help me put these in the trunk?" Michael got out of the car, noting how she flinched slightly when his door slammed shut. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 19 or 20. Her hospital scrubs were wrinkled and stained, and there was a name tag that read Sarah CNA clipped to her jacket. "Moving?" he asked gently, opening the trunk. "Something like that," she replied, carefully placing the cardboard box inside. The duffel bag followed, and Michael noticed how light it was, not the weight of someone's entire life, but the desperate gathering of only essentials. As Sarah climbed into the back seat instead of the front, another red flag in Michael's mental catalog, he caught sight of her face in the rear-view mirror. There was a bruise along her left cheekbone, partially covered with makeup, but still visible under the harsh dome light. "Where are we heading?" Michael asked, keeping his voice carefully neutral. He'd learned not to ask too many questions, but something about Sarah's demeanor made every instinct in his body stand at attention. "The Greyhound station downtown," she said, settling back into the seat. "Do you know where that is?" "Yeah, I know it." Michael put the car in drive, but didn't immediately pull away from the curb. In his mirror, he watched Sarah's face as she stared back at the building. Her hands were shaking. "Are you okay?" The words came out before he could stop them.
Sarah's eyes met his in the mirror, and for a moment her careful composure cracked. "I will be," she said, but her voice broke on the last word. That's when Michael heard it, the sound of heavy footsteps running across concrete. Sarah heard it too, and her entire body went rigid. "Drive," she whispered urgently. "Please, just drive." Michael looked in his side mirror and saw a man burst through the building's entrance. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing jeans and a white t-shirt, and even in the dim light, Michael could see the rage on his face. "Sarah!" The man's voice carried across the parking lot, raw and furious. "Sarah, get back here!"
Go, please, Sarah pleaded, sinking lower in the back seat. Please, he can't see me. The man was running toward them now, his heavy boots splashing through puddles. Michael didn't need any more explanation. He pressed the accelerator and the sedan lurched forward, just as the man reached the sidewalk behind them. Through the rear window, Michael watched the figure grow smaller, but he could still hear him shouting Sarah's name into the night. They drove in tense silence for several blocks before Sarah finally spoke. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure if you'd help." "What kind of help do you need?" Michael asked, though he was beginning to understand. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but hollow. "I've been planning this for 3 months, saving every dollar I could. Tony, he doesn't know I've been hiding money. Doesn't know I bought a bus ticket." She paused, and Michael heard her take a shaky breath. "Tonight was supposed to be my last shift at the hospital. I was supposed to give 2 weeks' notice, do everything proper, but then he came home early, and he was different tonight. Angrier." Michael felt his jaw clench. "How long?" 2 years. The words came out like a confession. "It wasn't always like this. He used to be sweet, protective, but then he lost his job, started drinking more, and..." She trailed off. "You don't have to explain," Michael said. He'd heard variations of this story before, had seen the bruises and the fear, but he'd never been in a position to do anything about it. Tonight felt different. "I'm 21 years old. I work 2 jobs, save every penny, and I've never been more than 50 miles from this city. But I have a sister in Portland. She doesn't know I'm coming, but she's the only family I have left who..." She stopped herself. "What?" "Who still talks to me. Tony made me cut ties with most of my friends, said they were filling my head with ideas." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Michael found himself thinking about his own daughter, wondering if she would have the courage Sarah was showing if she ever found herself in a similar situation. The thought made his chest tight. "The bus station. What time does your bus leave?" 3:15 a.m. It's the only one that goes straight through to Portland without stops in cities where he might think to look for me." Michael checked the dashboard clock. 1:31 a.m. They had time, but not much margin for error. As they drove through the empty streets toward downtown, Michael found himself studying Sarah's face in the rearview mirror. Despite everything, there was something determined about her expression. This wasn't just a woman running away. This was someone fighting for her life, making the hardest decision she'd ever had to make. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said suddenly. "Sure. You didn't have to help me back there. Most people would have just, minded their own business. Why did you?" Michael was quiet for a moment, thinking about his answer. "I have a daughter," he said finally. "She's about your age. I hope that if she ever needed help, someone would..." He couldn't finish the sentence. The truth was more complicated than that. He'd failed his own daughter in so many ways, had let his marriage fall apart, had chosen work and drinking and avoidance over being present for the people who needed him most. Maybe helping Sarah was a way of proving to himself that he wasn't completely lost. "What's her name?" Sarah asked. "Emma. She's smart, smarter than her old man ever was. She's in college now, studying to be a teacher." Michael's voice softened as he talked about her. "She stopped calling me a few weeks ago. Can't say I blame her." "I bet she misses you more than you think." The simple kindness in Sarah's voice hit him unexpectedly hard. Here was a young woman fleeing an abusive relationship with nothing but a duffel bag and a cardboard box, and she was trying to comfort him. They were approaching downtown now, and Michael could see the Greyhound station's neon sign glowing in the distance. The streets here were better lit, with a few late-night establishments still open, a 24-hour diner, a gas station, a couple of bars that catered to the after-midnight crowd. But as they got closer to the station, Michael noticed something that made his stomach drop. There was a white pickup truck parked across the street from the bus station. Even from 2 blocks away, he could see someone sitting inside, the glow of a cell phone illuminating their face. "Sarah?"
Michael said carefully.
So, if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Does Tony drive a white truck? She sat up straighter in the back seat, following his gaze. When she saw the truck, all the color drained from her face. Oh God, how did... He must have called someone. He must have figured out. She was hyperventilating now, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Michael pulled over 2 blocks from the station, his mind racing. Okay, listen to me. We're going to figure this out. How well does he know the city? Better than I do, Sarah said, her voice thick with despair. He grew up here. His cousin works for the police department. His brother-in-law drives a tow truck. He knows everyone, and everyone knows him. What about other ways out of the city? Train station? Closed until 6 a.m. And he'd think of that too. Sarah was crying now, quiet tears of frustration and fear. Michael sat in the driver's seat, staring at the white truck in the distance. He thought about his own failures, his own cowardice in the face of difficult situations. He thought about Emma and how disappointed she'd been in him the last time they'd talked. He thought about his wife's face the night she'd left, the way she'd looked at him like she didn't recognize the man she'd married.
Then he thought about Sarah, 21 years old and brave enough to bet everything on a bus ticket to Portland. I have an idea, he said finally, but you're going to have to trust me. Michael drove past the bus station slowly, making sure to stay in the right lane, away from the white pickup truck. As they passed, he caught a glimpse of the person inside, a heavy-set man with a baseball cap pulled low, smoking a cigarette. The man's head turned to follow their car, but Michael kept his speed steady and casual. That's not Tony, Sarah said from the back seat, relief evident in her voice. Friend of his? Probably his brother Rick. She paused, searching for the right words. He's worse than Tony in some ways, meaner. Tony gets angry and loses control. Rick gets angry and stays in control, which is scarier. Michael circled the block, thinking. The bus station was small, with only one entrance and limited places to hide. If Rick was watching the front, there was no way Sarah could get inside without being seen. And if Tony had called in favors from friends and family, there might be others watching different exits from the city. Tell me about your ticket, Michael said. Is it paper or electronic? Electronic, on my phone. And the bus, does it make any stops between here and Portland? A few, but the first one isn't until we're already out of the state, and I bought a through ticket. She leaned forward, gripping the back of his seat. Why? What are you thinking? Instead of answering, Michael pulled into the parking lot of an all-night diner 2 blocks from the bus station. The neon sign read Mel's 24-hour in faded red letters. Then through the windows, he could see a handful of customers scattered among the booths. Night shift workers grabbing coffee, a couple of insomniacs, someone who might have been a long-haul trucker. Wait here, he told Sarah. Keep your head down. I'll be right back. Michael walked into the diner, the little bell above the door announcing his entrance. The place smelled like coffee, bacon grease, and cleaning solution. A tired-looking waitress with graying hair and kind eyes looked up from behind the counter. Kitchen still open if you're hungry, hun, he said. Actually, I was wondering if I could ask you for a favor. It's kind of unusual. The waitress, her name tag read Betty, raised an eyebrow, but didn't look alarmed. After 30 years of working the overnight shift, Michael guessed she'd heard it all. Michael explained the situation carefully, leaving out specific details but making it clear that he was trying to help a young woman get away from an abusive situation. Betty listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious as he talked. There's a man watching the bus station, Michael concluded. She can't get to her bus safely. But I was thinking, do you know if there are any other stops along that route, somewhere outside the city where the bus might stop for passengers? Betty was quiet for a moment, then walked over to a rack of tourist brochures and bus schedules. She pulled out a folded timetable and spread it on the counter. Portland Express, she said, running her finger along the route. Let's see. Next stop after downtown would be... She paused, studying the small print. Miller's Creek, about 45 minutes north. It's just a gas station stop, but the bus takes on passengers there. Michael felt something like hope stirring in his chest. How do I get there? Betty gave him directions, then looked at him with eyes that had seen too much of the world's cruelty. You're a good man for doing this. she said. "There's not enough of that going around these days." "I'm really not," Michael said, "but I'm trying to be better." Back in the car, he explained the plan to Sarah. Her face went through a range of emotions: hope, fear, uncertainty, and finally a kind of desperate determination. It could work, but what if the bus is running late? What if Rick calls Tony and they figure out what we're doing? Then we'll figure out something else. But right now, this is our best shot. As they drove out of the city, Michael found himself thinking about the concept of second chances. His marriage was over, he knew that. Had known it even before his wife packed Emma's things and walked out. His relationship with his daughter was fractured, maybe beyond repair. His job at the auto shop was gone, replaced by the uncertain income of driving strangers around at all hours of the night. But sitting in this car with Sarah, helping her escape a life that was slowly killing her spirit, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in months: purpose. For the first time since his family fell apart, he was doing something that mattered, something that made a difference in someone else's life. "Can I tell you something?" Sarah said from the back seat. "Of course. I used to want to be a nurse, a real nurse, not just a CNA. I had plans to go back to school, get my degree. Tony said it was a waste of money, that I wasn't smart enough anyway." Her voice was steady now, stronger than it had been all night. "But my sister Grace, she's a nurse in Portland. She always said I could do it if I really wanted to." "She's right," Michael said. "From what I've seen tonight, you're smart enough for anything you set your mind to." "I haven't talked to Grace in over a year. Tony didn't like me calling her, said she was putting ideas in my head about leaving him." She was, but they were good ideas. They drove through the quiet suburbs and into rural countryside, past dark fields and scattered farmhouses. The rain had stopped completely now, and stars were beginning to show through the breaking clouds. For the first time all night, the world seemed peaceful. "What will you tell her when you get to Portland?" Michael asked. "The truth, I guess. That I finally got brave enough to leave, that I should have done it a long time ago." She was quiet for a moment. "What about you? Will you call your daughter?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know. Maybe. I've been thinking I should, but I don't know what to say. How do you apologize for letting someone down when they needed you most? You start with, 'I'm sorry,' and then you try to do better." Miller's Creek turned out to be exactly what Betty had described: a gas station with a small convenience store, sitting at the intersection of two rural highways. A hand-painted sign read "Bus Stop," with an arrow pointing towards a bench near the building's entrance. The parking lot was empty except for a single car, probably belonging to the night clerk. Michael checked his phone, 2:47 a.m. If the bus is running on schedule, they had about 20 minutes to wait. He helped Sarah get her duffel bag and cardboard box out of the trunk. Then they sat together on the bench outside the gas station. The night air was cool and clean, so different from the city they had left behind. "Are you scared?" Michael asked. "Terrified," she admitted, "but it's a different kind of scared than I've been living with. This is scared of the unknown. That's better than being scared of someone you live with." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the empty highway. Michael found himself thinking about the conversation he should have with Emma, the words he'd been too proud or too afraid to say. He thought about apologies and second chances, about the difference between running away from something and running towards something better. At 3:08 a.m., they saw headlights in the distance. The bus was early. As the Greyhound pulled into the gas station parking lot with a hiss of air brakes, Sarah stood up and shouldered her duffel bag. She looked younger than ever in the harsh fluorescent light, but there was something different about her posture now, straighter, more confident. "Michael," she said, turning to face him, "I don't know how to thank you for this." "You don't need to thank me. Just," he paused, searching for the right words, "just be happy, okay? Make a good life for yourself in Portland." "I will." She hugged him then, quick and impulsive, and he was surprised by how much the simple gesture meant to him. The bus driver opened the door and stepped out, stretching and checking his watch. Sarah approached him, showing her phone with the electronic ticket. They spoke briefly, and then she was climbing the steps into the bus, her duffel bag and cardboard box in tow.
Michael watched from beside his car as she found a seat near the back. Through the window, he could see her settling in, pulling out her phone, probably to text her sister. The bus driver finished his cigarette and climbed back aboard. With another hiss of air brakes, the bus pulled back onto the highway, its red taillights disappearing into the darkness. Michael stood in the empty parking lot, feeling an odd mixture of sadness and satisfaction. He'd helped her escape, but now she was gone, and he was alone again with his own unresolved life. He was about to get back in his car when his phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Made it on the bus safe. Thank you for giving me courage. Call your daughter. S. Michael stared at the message for a long time. Then he scrolled through his contacts until he found Emma's number. His thumb hovered over the call button. It was after 3 a.m. She'd be asleep. It was too late to call. But then he thought about Sarah, 21 years old and brave enough to bet everything on a bus ticket to a new life. He thought about second chances and the difference between too late and not too late enough. He pressed call. The phone rang 4 times before Emma answered, her voice thick with sleep and confusion. Dad? Dad, what's wrong? Do you know what time it is? Hearing her voice after weeks of silence hit Michael harder than he'd expected. For a moment, he couldn't speak, just stood there in the empty gas station parking lot, clutching his phone like a lifeline. Dad? Are you there? You're scaring me. I'm here, he managed finally. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know it's late. I needed to talk to you. Are you drunk? The question was asked without malice, but it still stung. No, I'm sober. I've been sober for, he had to think about it, 3 weeks now. There was silence on the other end of the line, and Michael could picture Emma sitting up in her dorm room bed, trying to process this late-night phone call from a father who'd been steadily disappearing from her life. Where are you? She asked finally. In the middle of nowhere, actually. I just helped someone, and it made me think about how I haven't been the father you deserved, how I let my problems become your problems, and how I stopped being someone you could count on. Michael started walking as he talked, pacing circles around his car in the empty parking lot. The words were coming easier now, like a dam that finally burst. I know I can't fix everything that went wrong. I can't undo the fights, or the times I wasn't there, or the way I handled things with your mom. But I want you to know that losing you, losing your trust, your respect, it's been the hardest thing I've ever gone through. Emma was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer but still guarded. Dad, you've said things like this before. After the fights with Mom, after you'd been drinking, you always say you're going to change, but then... I know. I've disappointed you. But tonight was different. I met someone who reminded me that it's never too late to try to be better. That courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you are scared. He found himself telling Emma about Sarah, about the late-night pickup call that had turned into something much more significant. He told her about the bruised young woman who'd been brave enough to leave everything behind for a chance at something better. You helped her escape? Emma asked, and Michael could hear something changing in her voice. I drove her to a bus station. She did the hard part. That's really good, Dad. I'm glad you helped her. Michael stopped pacing and leaned against his car. In the distance, he could see the lights of the city he had just driven from, the place where Sarah had lived in fear for 2 years before finding the courage to leave. Emma, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Do you think there's any chance we could try again? I don't mean go back to how things were, because how things were wasn't working. But maybe we could build something new. I don't know, Emma said, but she didn't hang up. I want to believe you, Dad, but it's hard. You missed my birthday. You missed my graduation. When Mom and I needed you most, you weren't there.
You're right. I wasn't there when you needed me, and I'm sorry. But I'm here now, and I want to try to be here going forward. Not just physically, but really present, really trying. They talked for another 20 minutes, standing in that empty parking lot under the stars. It wasn't a magic conversation that fixed everything. There had been too much damage for that. But it was a beginning, a tentative first step towards something that might eventually become forgiveness. I have to go, Emma said. I have an early class tomorrow, but Dad? Yeah. I'm glad you called, and I'm glad you helped that woman tonight. It sounds like something the Dad I used to know would have done. After Emma hung up, Michael sat in his car for a long time, processing the conversation. It hadn't gone perfectly, but it had gone better than he dared to hope. There would be more conversations, more chances to prove that he was serious about changing. But tonight had been a start. His phone buzzed with another ride request, but Michael declined it. Instead, he started driving back towards the city, but not towards his empty apartment. He had a different destination in mind. The all-night diner where he'd gotten directions to Miller's Creek was still open, its neon sign welcoming insomniacs and shift workers and anyone else who needed a place to sit and think. Michael parked in the same spot he had used earlier and walked inside. Betty was still behind the counter, refilling salt shakers and humming quietly to herself. She looked up when he entered and her face broke into a smile. Well, look who's back. Did it work out?
She made it onto the bus, Michael said, taking a seat at the counter. Thank you for your help. No thanks necessary, hon. You want some coffee? Something to eat? Coffee sounds good. Michael realized he hadn't eaten anything since yesterday afternoon, but he wasn't hungry. He felt hollow, but in a clean way, like a house that had been emptied of old furniture to make room for something better. Betty poured him a cup of black coffee and set it in front of him. You look like a man who's had a long night. Yeah, you could say that. Michael wrapped his hands around the warm mug, grateful for the simple comfort. Can I ask you something? Shoot. How do you know when someone's worth a second chance? Betty considered the question while she wiped down the already clean counter. Well, I guess it depends. Are we talking about giving someone else a second chance or asking for one yourself? Both, maybe. In my experience, Betty said, settling onto the stool behind the register, people deserve as many chances as they're willing to work for. But the key word there is work. Saying you're sorry is easy. Proving you mean it takes time. What if you've already let someone down? What if they have every right not to trust you anymore? Then you start small. You show up when you say you will. You keep the promises you make, even the little ones. You prove that you're serious about being different. Betty refilled his coffee without being asked. The young lady tonight, Sarah, she's starting over completely. But you don't have to burn everything down to build something better. Sometimes you can renovate. Michael nodded, thinking about Emma and the careful hope he heard in her voice during their phone call. Thinking about his ex-wife, who maybe deserved an apology, even if their marriage couldn't be saved. Thinking about himself and the man he used to be, before the bills and the stress and the drinking had worn him down to someone he didn't recognize. I've been driving for Uber for 6 months, ever since I lost my job at the auto shop. I told myself it was temporary, just until I figured things out. But the truth is, I was hiding, staying in motion so I wouldn't have to face how badly I'd screwed things up. And now, I think maybe it's time to stop running. Time to figure out what I want to rebuild and how to do it right this time. They sat in a comfortable silence for a while. The only sounds the hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of a delivery truck passing on the highway. The diner felt like a sanctuary, a neutral space between the life Michael had been living and the one he might be able to build. Betty, he said finally, do you know if there are any auto shops around here that might be hiring? She smiled. As a matter of fact, my nephew runs a garage about 10 miles down the highway. Good, honest work. He's been looking for someone reliable. Reliable, Michael repeated. I used to be that. Could be again, if you want it bad enough. Michael finished his coffee and left a generous tip. As he walked back to his car, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Optimism. Not the manic, desperate kind that comes from denial, but the quiet, steady variety that comes from making hard decisions and sticking to them. He drove home as the sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. His apartment would still be too quiet, too empty. The bills would still be waiting at his kitchen table. The damage to his relationships wouldn't magically disappear. But for the first time since his wife had walked out, Michael felt like he had a plan. Not a perfect plan, not an easy one, but a real one. He would apply at Betty's nephew's garage. He would call Emma again in a few days, not with grand promises, but with small updates about his progress. He would stop using motion as an escape and start using it as a way forward. As Michael pulled into his apartment complex, he noticed something that made him pause. There was a moving truck parked in front of Building B, and a young woman about Sarah's age was directing two men carrying boxes. She looked tired but determined, the kind of tired that comes from making a big life change, rather than running from one. He didn't know her story, didn't know if she was moving in or moving out, starting over or just starting. But seeing her there taking charge of her own life in the early morning light reminded him that courage was contagious. Sarah's bravery had inspired him to call Emma. Maybe his small act of help had given Sarah the final push she needed to get on that bus. Maybe that's how change really happened. Not in grand gestures, but in small acts of kindness that rippled outward, touching lives in ways you might never know about. He parked his car and walked towards his building, but instead of going straight inside, he stopped at his mailbox. Among the bills and junk mail was a letter from Emma's college, probably asking for a donation he couldn't afford to make. But as he started to throw it away, he noticed it was addressed to him specifically, not to a parent or guardian like the fundraising letters usually were. He opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note from Emma's academic advisor, informing him that Emma had made the dean's list last semester and had been selected for a competitive internship program. The note mentioned that Emma had spoken about her father often, and that despite some recent family challenges, she was clearly proud of the work ethic and determination he had instilled in her. Michael read the letter 3 times, standing there in the pre-dawn quiet of the apartment complex lobby. His daughter was proud of him. Despite everything that had gone wrong, despite all the ways he'd failed her, there was still something in her that remembered the man he used to be. He folded the letter carefully and put it in his wallet, next to his driver's license and the business card Betty had given him for her nephew's garage. Upstairs in his apartment, Michael made a pot of coffee and sat at his kitchen table, looking out the window as the city slowly came to life. In a few hours, people would be heading to work, starting their days, making decisions that might change their lives in ways they couldn't tell. Sarah would be on a bus somewhere in the mountains, maybe sleeping, maybe looking out the window at landscapes she'd never seen before, carrying nothing but hope and determination toward a sister that didn't know she was coming. Michael picked up his phone and opened his text messages. He scrolled to Emma's number and typed, "Just wanted you to know that I got a letter from your school today. Dean's list. I'm so proud of you. I know I haven't been the father you deserved, but I want you to know that everything good and strong about you comes from inside you, not from me. You're going to do amazing things. Love you, kiddo." He sent that message before he could second-guess himself. Then he opened a new message and typed, "Sarah, I hope you made it to Portland safely. Your courage tonight reminded me that it's never too late to try to be better. Thank you for that gift. Michael." He sent that message too. Finally, he opened his laptop and began typing an email to his ex-wife, Linda. It had been 4 months since they'd spoken, and that conversation had ended in anger and accusations. But tonight had taught me that some words needed to be said, even if they came too late to fix what was broken. "Linda," he wrote, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I understand why. I know I hurt you and Emma in ways that maybe can't be forgiven, but I want you to know that I'm getting help. I'm sober, and I'm trying to rebuild my life into something worthy of
the family I lost. I'm not asking for another chance with us. I know that ship has sailed. But I am asking for the chance to be a better father to Emma and to show you both that the man you fell in love with is still in here somewhere, buried under all the mistakes and failures. I'm going to prove it through actions, not words. You deserve that much, and so does Emma." Michael read the email twice before sending it. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And honesty, he was learning, was where change had to begin. The sun was fully up now, streaming through his apartment windows and highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. Michael showered and put on clean clothes, Not his driving clothes, but the button-down shirt and khakis he used to wear to the auto shop. Then he got back in his car and drove 10 miles down the highway to a small garage with a hand-painted sign that read, Honest Ed's Auto Repair. The owner, Ed Martinez, was Betty's nephew, a stocky man in his 40s with grease-stained hands and an easy smile. They talked for 20 minutes about engines and transmissions and the satisfaction of fixing things that were broken. Ed offered him a position starting Monday morning, 40 hours a week with benefits and the possibility of overtime. I can't pay what the big shops pay, Ed admitted, but it's steady work and I treat my people right. Steady sounds perfect, Michael said, and meant it. Driving back to the city, Michael felt something he'd almost forgotten: anticipation for tomorrow. Not the dread that had been his constant companion for months, but actual curiosity about what the next day might bring. He would work with his hands again, fixing things instead of just surviving them. He would have a routine, a purpose, a reason to get up in the morning that wasn't just avoiding the alternative. His phone buzzed with a text message. Dad, got your message. Thank you for saying that. I love you too. And Dad, I'm proud of you for helping that woman tonight. That sounds like the man I remember. Another message came in a moment later from the number Sarah had texted him from earlier. Made it to Portland. Grace cried when she saw me, starting afresh tomorrow. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Michael pulled over at a red light and wiped his eyes. 6 months ago, he'd been a man with a steady job and a family, slowly destroying both through neglect and poor choices. This morning, he was unemployed and alone, but somehow he felt more hopeful than he had in years. The difference, he realized, was that 6 months ago, he'd been passively letting his life fall apart. Today, he was actively building something new. As he drove through the city streets, Michael thought about the chain of events that had led him to this moment. A late-night ride request from a stranger, a young woman's courage in the face of danger, an all-night diner, and a waitress named Betty who knew that sometimes people just needed directions to somewhere better. A phone call to his daughter that had taken more courage than he thought he possessed. None of it had been planned. None of it had felt particularly heroic in the moment. But somehow, in the span of one night, Michael had remembered who he used to be and caught a glimpse of who he might become. He parked outside his apartment building and sat in his car for a moment, looking up at the windows of his empty apartment. Tomorrow, he would start a new job. This weekend, he would call Emma again, not with apologies, but with updates about his progress. Sometime soon, he would drive past the Greyhound station and think about Sarah, hoping she was building the life she deserved in Portland. But today, for the first time in months, Michael was going home not to hide from his life, but to rest up for it. He locked his car and walked toward his building, past the young woman who was still directing the movers. She looked up as she passed and smiled, the kind of tired but genuine smile that comes from doing something difficult but necessary. Moving day? Michael asked. New apartment. New start. Those are the best kind, Michael said. As he climbed the stairs to his apartment, Michael's phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Is this Michael? This is Grace, Sarah's sister. Sarah told me what you did for her. I just wanted to say thank you. There aren't enough people in the world willing to help a stranger. You probably saved her life. Michael sat down on his couch and stared at that message for a long time. He thought about the ripple effects of kindness, about how one person's courage could inspire others, about how change happened not in dramatic moments, but in quiet decisions to be better than you were yesterday. Outside his window, the city hummed with its usual daytime energy. People going to work, students heading to class, families starting their days. Ordinary people living ordinary lives. Most of them probably unaware that tonight, somewhere in the city, there would be someone who needed help and someone else who might be brave enough to provide it. Michael made another pot of coffee and sat down at his kitchen table with a notebook and pen. He had plans to make, apologies to craft,
a future to rebuild one small decision at a time. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But for the first time and longer than he could remember, he believed it was possible. The morning stretched ahead of him, full of possibility, and for once that didn't scare him. It felt like hope. 3 hours later, Michael was still sitting at his kitchen table, but now he had pages of notes spread out in front of him. Plans for paying off his debts, a schedule for regular phone calls with Emma, ideas for rebuilding his relationship with his ex-wife, even if only as co-parents. The concrete steps felt manageable when written down, like a roadmap out of the wilderness he'd been wandering through. His phone buzzed, startling him from his thoughts. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but something made him answer anyway. Hello? Is this Michael? This is Grace, Sarah's sister. I hope you don't mind that she gave you my number. I wanted to call you myself. Michael felt his heart rate quicken. Is Sarah okay? Did she make it there safely? She's here. She's safe. She's sleeping right now. The poor thing was exhausted. But Michael, I needed to talk to you about what you did for her. I just gave her a ride. She did all the hard work. No, Grace's voice was firm. You did so much more than that. Sarah told me about the man at the bus station, about how you took her to Miller's Creek instead. She told me about how you listened to her, how you made her feel like she mattered. Do you understand what that meant to her? Michael was quiet, not sure how to respond. Grace continued. My sister has been with that man for 2 years, 2 years of being told she was worthless, that she was lucky he put up with her, that no one else would ever care about her. And then a complete stranger, you, proved him wrong in one night. You showed her that there are still good people in the world. She was brave enough to leave on her own. I just happened to be there. You chose to be there, Grace corrected. You could have dropped her at the bus station and driven away. You could have minded your own business when you saw that truck, but you didn't. You saw someone in trouble and you helped.
Michael found himself thinking about all the times over the past months when he'd seen people who might have needed help. Other drivers broken down on the side of the road, passengers who seemed distressed, neighbors who looked like they were struggling. How often had he told himself it wasn't his business, that he had his own problems to worry about? Grace, he said finally, can I ask you something? Of course. When Sarah gets back on her feet, when she's ready to move forward with her life, what's she planning to do? She wants to go back to school, nursing school. She's always been good at taking care of people, but that man convinced her she wasn't smart enough for college. Grace's voice warmed with pride. I told her she's brilliant. She just needs someone to believe in her again. She is brilliant, Michael said. You could see it in how she planned her escape. 2 months of saving money, timing everything perfectly. That takes intelligence and incredible strength. I'm going to help her apply to the nursing program at Portland Community College. She can live with me while she gets her prerequisites done. She paused. Michael, I know this might sound strange, but would you be willing to write her a letter of recommendation? I know you only knew her for a few hours, but sometimes the most important things people do for us happen in a short time. Michael felt a lump form in his throat. I'd be honored to write that letter. They talked for another 10 minutes, with Grace sharing more about Sarah's goals and dreams, plans that had been buried under 2 years of emotional abuse, but were now slowly surfacing again. When they hung up, Michael immediately opened his laptop and began drafting the recommendation letter. To whom it may concern. I am writing to recommend Sarah Patterson for admission to your nursing program. Although I have known Sarah for only a brief time, I witnessed qualities in her that convince me she will be an exceptional nurse and a valuable addition to your program. I met Sarah during a moment of crisis in her life. She was leaving an abusive situation with nothing but a small bag of belongings and a bus ticket to a new life.
What struck me immediately was her courage, her determination, and her careful planning. Despite being afraid, despite having every reason to doubt herself, she had methodically saved money, researched her options, and made the difficult decision to start over. During our conversation, Sarah spoke about her dreams of becoming a nurse. Even in the midst of her own trauma, she talked about wanting to help others, to be there for people in their most vulnerable moments. She has the compassion, the intelligence, and the strength of character that your profession requires. Sarah Patterson is a young woman who has overcome significant obstacles to pursue her education. She deserves the chance to prove what she can accomplish when given the opportunity to succeed. I recommend her without reservation. Michael read the letter twice, making small edits, then saved it to send to Grace later. Writing about Sarah's strength and determination had reminded him of something important. People were capable of incredible change when they decided to fight for their lives instead of just surviving them. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation last night. I want to try too. Maybe we could start with phone calls once a week? Sunday evenings? I don't have classes then." He typed back immediately. "That sounds perfect. This Sunday at 7 p.m.? It's a date, Dad." The simple exchange filled him with more joy than he'd felt in months. A weekly phone call wasn't much, but it was a beginning. It was Emma saying she still believed in the possibility that he could be better. Michael spent the rest of the morning cleaning his apartment, really cleaning it, not just moving piles of mess from one surface to another. He opened windows to let fresh air in, did laundry, washed dishes that had been sitting in the sink for days. It felt symbolic somehow, this physical act of putting his space in order, while he worked on putting his life in order. Around noon, his phone rang again. This time, it was Linda, his ex-wife. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he answered. "Hello? Linda? Michael?" Her voice was cautious but not hostile. "I got your email. I know you probably don't want to talk to me." "Actually, I do want to talk to you. Not about us getting back together. That's not going to happen. But about Emma and about what you wrote." They talked for over an hour. It was painful at times, with Linda listing all the ways Michael had failed as a husband and father. But it was also healing, in the way that finally draining an infected wound can be healing. Linda told me about the nights she'd stayed awake worrying about him, about the mornings Emma had asked why Daddy seemed so sad all the time, about the day she had finally realized that staying was hurting their daughter more than leaving would. "I never wanted to keep Emma from you," Linda said near the end of their conversation. "I wanted to keep her from the version of you that was drinking and angry and absent even when you were sitting right next to us. If you're serious about getting sober, about being the father she remembers from when she was a little, then yes, I want you in her life. I'm serious. I know I have to prove it, not just say it. But Linda, last night something happened that reminded me who I used to be, who I still could be." He told her about Sarah, about the choice he'd made to help instead of looking away, and about the conversation with Emma that had followed. Linda listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That sounds like the Michael I married, the one who stopped to help strangers change flat tires, who always had time for people who needed it. I wondered where that man had gone. He was still here, just buried under a lot of bad decisions and self-pity. But I'm digging him out." When they hung up, Michael felt drained but lighter, as if he had been carrying a heavy backpack for miles and had finally been allowed to set it down. The conversation hadn't fixed their marriage. Some things were too broken to repair. But it had cleared the air between them, established that they could work together as Emma's parents, even if they couldn't be married to each other. That afternoon, Michael drove to Honest Ed's Auto Repair to fill out paperwork and meet the other mechanics. Ed introduced me to Carlos, a young guy about Emma's age, who was working his way through community college, and Frank, a veteran mechanic in his 60s, who'd been fixing cars since before Michael was born. "We're not fancy here," Ed explained as they walked through the shop. "No computerized diagnostic equipment or hydraulic lifts, just old-fashioned mechanical work. But we treat people fairly, both customers and employees. No one gets ripped off, no one gets taken advantage of." Michael nodded, looking around at the organized chaos of the garage. Tools arranged on pegboards, parts sorted in labeled bins, work orders clipped to a board near the front counter. It felt like a place where things got fixed instead of just replaced, where craftsmanship still mattered. "When I was younger," Michael said, "I used to love the puzzle aspect of mechanical work. Figuring out what was wrong, finding the right solution. I miss that." "Well, you'll get plenty of puzzles here," Frank said with a grin. "Yesterday, we had a '92 Honda that was making a noise like a dying cat."
Turned out to be a loose heat shield vibrating against the exhaust pipe. 15-minute fix, but it took 2 hours to figure out what was causing it. Michael laughed. "I had a similar problem once with a Ford pickup. Drove me crazy for a week before I found it." As they talked shop, sharing stories about stubborn problems and creative solutions, Michael felt something he'd almost forgotten. The camaraderie of working alongside people who shared your skills and understood your challenges. It wasn't just about having a job. It was about being part of something, contributing to a team effort. "You start Monday at 7, Ed said as they finished the tour. "Bring your own tools if you have them, but don't worry if you don't. We can loan you what you need until you get back on your feet." Driving home, Michael realized he was looking forward to Monday morning for the first time in months. Not dreading it, not just enduring it, but actually anticipating the satisfaction of working with his hands again, of solving problems and fixing things that were broken. That evening, as the sun was setting, Michael found himself back at Mel's 24-hour diner. He wasn't sure why he'd driven there. He wasn't particularly hungry, and he didn't have anywhere else to be. But something about the place drew him back. Maybe the memory of Betty's kindness, or maybe just the need to process everything that had happened since he'd last sat at that counter. Betty was still working, though she looked tired after what must have been a very long shift. She smiled when she saw him come in. "Well, look who's back again. How'd it go with your young lady friend?" "She made it to Portland safely. She's with her sister now, planning to go back to school. I wanted to thank you again for your help with the directions and for the information about your nephew's shop. Ed hired you. I start Monday." Betty's tired face lit up with genuine pleasure. "That's wonderful. Ed's a good man. He'll treat you right." She poured him a cup of coffee without being asked. "So what brings you back here tonight?" "I think I'm trying to figure out what happens next. This morning I felt so clear about everything, like I had it all figured out. But now, I guess I'm scared I'll mess it up again, that this feeling of wanting to be better will fade and I'll go back to being the person I was a week ago." "That's normal," Betty said, leaning against the counter. "Change is scary, even good change. But you know what I think? I think you're different now than you were last week. Not because of some magic transformation, but because you've seen what you're capable of. You helped that girl when she needed it most. You called your daughter and had an honest conversation. You got yourself a job doing work you care about. Those aren't accidents. They're choices." "But what if I can't keep making the right choices?" "Then you'll make some wrong ones, and you'll learn from them, and you'll try again. Perfection isn't the goal, honey.
progress is. Michael nodded, thinking about Sarah on that bus to Portland, starting over with nothing but hope and determination. Thinking about Emma, willing to give him another chance despite all the times he'd let her down. Even Linda, who could have refused to take his call but chose to listen instead. Betty, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Have you ever had to start over? Really start over? I mean, not just change jobs or move to a new place, but rebuild your whole life? Betty was quiet for a moment, wiping down glasses that were already clean. When I was about your age, my husband left me with 3 kids and a mountain of debt. I never worked outside the home, didn't have a high school diploma, didn't know how I was going to keep food on the table. What did you do? I got my GED while working nights at this diner. My sister watched the kids while I was here, and I studied during the slow hours. It took me 3 years, but I eventually saved enough to put a down payment on a little house. The kids all turned out fine, better than fine. My youngest is a teacher now, my middle boy's an electrician, and my oldest girl's a nurse. You must be proud of them. I'm proud that we all survived it, but mostly I'm proud that I didn't give up when it felt impossible. There were nights I wanted to just walk away from it all, but I had 3 reasons to keep going, and that made all the difference. Michael thought about his own reasons to keep going. Emma, who still believed in the possibility that he could be better. Sarah, who'd trusted him with her safety and her story. Even Linda, who could have refused to take his call but chose to listen instead. I think I understand, he said. The thing about starting over, Betty continued, is that you don't have to become a completely different person. You just have to become the best version of who you already are. The kindness you showed that girl tonight, that was already in you. The love you have for your daughter, that never went away. You're not starting from scratch, Michael. You're just clearing away all the stuff that was covering up your better self. Michael finished his coffee and left another generous tip. As he walked back to his car, he thought about Betty's words. Maybe she was right. Maybe he didn't need to transform into someone entirely new. Maybe he just needed to remember who he'd been before the drinking and the depression and the isolation had taken over. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Talked to Grace about nursing school today. She says you're going to write me a letter. You don't have to do that. You've already done so much. Michael typed back, I want to. You're going to be an amazing nurse, Sarah. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise. Thank you for everything. You saved my life last night. You saved your own life. I just gave you a ride. Same thing sometimes. Michael smiled as he drove home through the quiet streets. Maybe that was true. Sometimes the most important thing you could do for someone was simply show up when they needed you. Sometimes salvation came in the form of a stranger willing to drive you somewhere safe. Back in his apartment, Michael spent the evening organizing his tools, preparing for his first day at Ed's shop. As he cleaned and sorted his wrenches and screwdrivers, he thought about the parallel between fixing machines and fixing lives. Both required patience, persistence, and the willingness to take things apart before you could put them back together properly. Both required hope that broken things could be made whole again. Before going to bed, Michael wrote one more email, this time to himself, to be sent a year from now. In it, he detailed his plans and promises: to stay sober, to rebuild his relationship with Emma, to be a reliable employee at Ed's shop, to check on Sarah's progress at nursing school. He wrote about the lessons he'd learned from one extraordinary night, about the difference between running away from problems and running toward solutions. If you're reading this a year from now, he concluded, I hope you've kept these promises. I hope you remember Sarah's courage and Betty's wisdom. I hope you remember that change is possible, that second chances matter, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is help a stranger find their way home. Michael set the email to send in exactly a year, then turned off his laptop and got ready for bed.
Tomorrow was Sunday. His first phone call with Emma was still a week away, but he was already looking forward to it. Monday, he would start his new job. Next weekend, he would write Sarah's recommendation letter and mail it to Portland. Small steps, manageable goals. A life rebuilt one careful choice at a time. As he drifted off to sleep, Michael thought about the butterfly effect, the idea that small actions could have large consequences. A late-night ride request from a stranger had led to a phone call with his daughter, a new job, a conversation with his ex-wife, and the beginning of something that felt like hope. He'd helped Sarah escape her old life, but in doing so, she'd helped him find his way back to his own.
If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch, and don't forget to subscribe.